What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Commercial Kitchen Chronicles, the podcast dedicated to the commercial food equipment repair industry. My name is Pat Finley. I'm a lead master certified technician at General Parts Group in Indianapolis, Indiana, as well as a certified Sufessor trainer. My goal is to shine a light on what I believe to be one of the most interesting and rewarding industries a field service technician can work in. I love the work I do, and I'm glad you're here listening to this podcast. In this episode, we're going to cover commercial equipment installation. We're going to cover new kitchens versus existing kitchens, correct equipment for your needs, utilities, proper startup and its importance, flow or layout of your kitchen, and serviceability. Thanks for tuning in. First up, let's cover new kitchens versus existing kitchens. New kitchens are pretty straightforward. Your kitchen is going to be drawn up on a blueprint, and you're going to pick and choose what equipment you want and where you want it. Will help your layout and everything else. Existing kitchens is where we run into problems. New kitchens, you're going to know all your utility demands and needs up front. Your gas piping will be piped accordingly to your BTU ratings for your appliances. Water needs will be piped in as well. Electricity will be specific to each piece of equipment. Where we run into problems is an existing kitchen. A lot of times they cram more and more stuff under a hood that's not sized adequately, as well as undersized gas piping, undersized water, and incorrect electrical. So a big important step is to make sure that your gas is piped correctly. A lot of times we run into volume issues. You'll have the pressure, but as soon as you start turning on multiple pieces of equipment, pressure falls flat on its face. You know you have a volume problem with this. Also water. Sometimes you'll have a building that was built for one steamer, and they'll put in two steamers or several combi ovens. And they'll have a 1/2 inch water supply, and you really need at least a 3/4 or an inch and split it up per unit. So you can run into starving issues if you turn everything on at once, if you're cleaning multiple items at one time. Electrical can be a pretty big issue. A lot of times I'll get equipment that's rated for 208 and there's really 240 at the building. That or they don't have enough electrical spaces or amperage left in their panel to power their new pieces of equipment. I ran into that plenty of times as well. So you want to make sure you have the electrical to back your new equipment and the rest of your utilities are up to par. Floor drains become a big issue as well. You cannot have a floor drain directly underneath a piece of equipment. A lot of equipment has fans now, and they suck in air through the bottom or through the back to cool them. If you're sucking in that hot steam, you're going to be blowing that moisture all over sensitive components such as fans, motors, electrical boards, contactors, relays, and such. So you don't want that steam to be drawn in the back of those units. So keep in mind your floor drain locations when selecting where you want a piece of equipment at. Correct equipment for your needs. I see this a lot of times. A customer will buy something used because they see it cheap and they think they can use it, and they really can't use it in their application. A lot of times you'll see some places that'll have these little mini rotating ovens. I mean, they're cool and all, but they really don't serve a function. And some of them are sold to places they shouldn't be sold to based on, hey, you can bake this, this, and this, but really it doesn't really suit their needs. It takes up a lot of space and it's kind of underutilized. So make sure your equipment is designed for what you're going to be cooking. You don't need a whole lot for some things, and some things you need more. So make sure you keep that in mind. Let's stick with utilities. First off, electric. Electric is probably one of the most important utilities to double check prior to doing install. A lot of times we're not involved in the sales process, but we will be involved in a pre-site survey for the installation of equipment to verify everything is correct. You want to make sure you have the proper phase, single or three phase. You want to check voltage 120, 208, 240, 480, depending on your location and your equipment specifications. Also, you want to make sure you have proper amperage rating breakers supplied, and you also want to make sure your circuit breaker box is not overloaded. A lot of times in these older restaurants, you'll see tons of breakers in there, not labeled. Some say spare, have actually being used. You'll have piggybacks. You don't want to get into a mess where you're undersized on electrical. Gas is the second biggest issue I run into. These kitchens, a lot of times existing, will have like a 1-inch gas line. They'll already have several pieces of equipment and they're trying to add another one. So you want to know your gas pressure before you even start. I'm running into more and more 2-pound systems. I was actually even ran into a 10-pound system, which was kind of crazy, but I have seen it. So you want to make sure you have enough gas volume to supply whatever you are adding to the kitchen. You don't want to lose 20% on startup, or you're going to run into some issues. These modern combis have a pre-mixed burner, so it mixes the air and gas before going into the burner chamber. So if they lose more than 20%, they're going to starve for gas. They're not going to want lights. They're not going to want to keep a burner burning, and you're going to drop out. You're going to have gas issues. Also, What I like to do is on startup, I like to fire everything up in the kitchen and take gas pressure. So I'll get my static pressure, which is nothing on, and write that down, note that, make sure it's within tolerance, and then I'll fire everything up, and then I'll fire on that piece of equipment and see where it drops down to. You never want the pressure to drop below your manifold rating. Um, Also, check and make sure you don't need a regulator. Like I said, 2 pound systems on a normal gas valve is going to be a bad day. You're going to blow the valve apart. You're going to blow seals out of valves. You're going to lock up valves. Most of your gas valves are rated for 1/2 pound systems. I like to keep them under 12 for natural gas, propane under 14. Um, and if you need a regulator, make sure you size one properly, 3/4 inch, 1 inch, depending on the input, and also the volume of gas flowing through there. Also, you need to know what your pressure is to your regulator and what you need going to your unit as well when sizing a regulator. Um, I've run into all kinds of problems where you start firing stuff up, especially in the morning. Everything will fire up and you'll start dropping in appliances just because you run out of gas, and that's a volume issue. Like I said, these restaurants, who knows when they were built? Most time they don't upgrade the gas. I've ran into it several times where I've had 10 pieces on a 1 inch or inch and a half line, and I add a combi oven in, and the gas just falls on its face. And the oven sometimes will work, sometimes it won't, but you're asking for trouble, especially when they start adding more stuff. Or say if it's in the summer, your gas is questionable low. Come fall and wintertime, they start firing off heat or other appliances, and it's going to fall on its face. So you don't want to risk getting called back and be that guy, getting blamed for why my gas isn't working right, or why my gas is falling out. It was fine then, now it won't keep up. So keep that in mind when you're working with gas. Water, make sure you have plenty of volume. Like I said, kitchens, man, I'll have a 1/2 inch and they'll try feeding 2 or 3 steamers and a combi, or a tilt kettle or skillet. They'll want to feed a water line to it. Um, you got to make sure you have the water flow, or the unit's going to time out, not filling fast enough. All kinds of issues can come about. Most of the time, the issues are during cleaning cycle when you're using a ton of water. A lot of them, if they don't sense enough water, they'll shut down. So keep that in mind. Water issues. Filtration for water. If you got terrible water, I'm in Indiana. Our water is full of lime scale. I've had boilers lime up in 6 months, 5 months. In some rural areas, they're on well water. It's not treated. So I recommend, if you're doing any kind of steam equipment, combi oven, ice machines, get a water analysis and have it professionally tested, and let them recommend the water softening or water filtration you need for those units. I've installed a lot of RO systems on combis. You don't want it too pure, because too pure water can be hazardous for stainless, so you have to bleed a little bit in. But like I said, I like to get a water sample and send it in to a professional and have them deal with it. That way my name's not involved. I'm just installing what they recommended. Proper startup and installation. We install a lot of equipment in the Indianapolis area. Um, I enjoy it. It's different. It's fulfilling work. You walk in and there's nothing there. You install it and it's a working oven. It's a working steamer. It's a working combi, fryers, whatever. I mean, I take enjoyment out of it. It's not something I do every day, so it satisfies my need for change. Um, but in that being said, you want to make sure it's done right. You want to make sure you do a clean job. You want to make sure your piping's done right, your water lines are done right, gas lines, electric. That's your name on the line. So if you installed it, they're going to come back to you if something's not right. I like to document everything I do on installation, take pictures, videos, whatever, explain everything. That way I have proof that, hey, this is how it was installed. So if something happens and somebody changes something or something breaks, you're not the one to be blamed if you did it correctly. So keep that in mind when you install a piece of equipment. Startup. Most manufacturers will pay for startup. Not all of them, and not on every product line. It just depends. But majority of them have a startup procedure. Now, whether they pay for it or the customer pays for it, that's to be determined. But if they have startup paperwork, follow that paperwork, and it's going to make sure that your equipment is installed right for longevity and life of the equipment. It's going to ask if it's a gas. It's going to ask gas pressure, stack dynamic, type, manifold pressure. It's going to want to know electric voltage, amperage, so on. It's also going to make sure you set the timers. If it's got times, you want to set the times, dates, software version, everything else. Just to make sure the equipment is properly installed and ready to go in the kitchen. You don't want your customer to come in the next day or later that day and it's not set up. There's no menus there. A lot of times we don't put the menus on there, but if you can, make sure the menu is right. If the customer has it, make sure you put it on there for them. If you have to manually program a computer, I walk through with the customer on how to program the computer. That way they know how to do it in the future and it's not calling you back out or calling the factory. So that's part of the proper startup is to make sure the customer is familiar with programming and how to use the equipment. I always verify that the customer knows how to put the filter pan together right on fryers. That's going to save you a lot of callbacks in the future. Those filter pans can be kind of a pain in the butt, but if you assemble it correctly and you make sure you demonstrate how to assemble it correctly, you're going to save yourself some service calls in the future. Um, as far as anything else on startup, that pretty much covers it. I mean, the paperwork's pretty self-explanatory. It walks you through step by step what they want. So just follow that. Flow or layout of your kitchen. This one is kind of tricky. New ones, they're going to be pretty well laid out by a kitchen designer. They've been doing it long enough, and they walk the customer through with what they're doing and what goes forward. So as far as us, flow or layout's going to be kind of tricky. Most time, I'm replacing a piece of equipment or I'm just jamming something in the line. So we don't always have the luxury of, hey, I put this here, I put this there. If I see something going in somewhere and I question it, I bring it up to the manager or the chef and let them know that I think it'd probably do better over here. It's not my kitchen, but I've been around it long enough where I know what works and what really doesn't. Bring it to their attention. If they don't want to move something, don't move it. Put it where they want it. You just want to make sure your doors are open in the right direction and so forth. Nothing's worse than opening a door and it's in the way of you loading a piece of equipment up with food. So keep that in mind when you're installing it. Most of the time it's already done, decided when we get there. So just follow whatever they want, really. Serviceability. This is a big one. We have to work on this stuff. Most of this equipment has required space for working on it. Some equipment's on the wheels or casters, some isn't, some's on stationary stands, some sit on the ground. So you got to think about your future and how you're going to need to fix that thing. Most of them want to be so far away from heat sources. Some say zero heat sources, and people think that means, hey, I can put this right here, and you really can't because you still have to have 18 to 20 inches for serviceability. I'm not a little guy, so I like to have some room. I don't feel like getting burned when I got to fix something. So if you can give yourself some space to work in, so be it. But I'm telling you, in these older kitchens, you're going to cram it in there. Just make sure that you note on the paperwork that, hey, this is a limited serviceability. I don't know how I'm going to get to this thing to fix it, repair it. And that way, if you get a warranty call, some warranty manufacturers won't pay the additional time it takes to move equipment out of the way to repair an oven. So keep that in mind. Like I said, you don't want to put an oven right next to a heat source because that heat source can melt critical components and it'll also tarnish or distort the color of the stainless steel or whatever that cabinet is made of on those ovens. This is just a quick run through of some things I deal with as far as installation. Um, it varies. You can run into all different kinds of things though. I, for one, don't like seeing coolers under hoods. I'll see some low boys, which are fine. Low boys are generally, 2, 4, 6, 8 drawers. And on top of those, they'll have a char broiler or a grill or a griddle or a burner cooktop. That's fine. Just make sure that's rated to have a heat source on top of it. Make sure it's available for serviceability. Some you can go through the front, some you can go through the side, some you have to go through the back. Just keeping all that in mind when you're looking in a kitchen. I don't like having uprights under a hood because a lot of times on those upright coolers or freezers, your condensing unit is on top and you have a lot of grease that's airborne under a hood because you have the air coming out the hood. You'll have fresh makeup air coming in, so it's kind of a big circulation for grease. And when those condensing units kick on, it'll suck all that grease and contamination into that coil, causing issues. Those coils, once they're caked up with grease, they'll suck dust, dirt, debris in there, and they just clog up really fast. I've had to pull some units out from under hoods, cut the condensing unit coil out, and physically clean it in hot water with degreaser, coil cleaner, everything else, and put it back together in order for this unit to run right. So keep that in mind. You don't want to install coolers next to high heat sources because it's not going to run as efficiently as it's designed to. Back to the ice machines. I've seen some crazy stuff on ice machines. Double stack units make it real fun to work, especially when the top unit's halfway through the ceiling and you got to take out ceiling grid to get to it. So that just goes back to serviceability. If you got to install it that way, I understand it, but I'd prefer not to. This is coming from a technician standpoint. I don't sell equipment, so I just got to work on it generally, and I don't like moving stuff, tearing a ceiling apart to work on something. So keep that in mind. Walk-in coolers and freezers are a totally different beast. Some are self-contained units that drop through the ceiling and they're open to the environment. Some are remote condensed, and they'll put them on top of the unit. They'll put them outside. They'll put them beside the unit. All different kinds of variations can be found in the commercial kitchen. Um, if you're gonna put a condensed unit on top and it's a sealed kitchen, sealed ceiling, you're gonna have issues with dirt and debris getting in that coil, and it's gonna be hot in there in the summer. So in the summer, you're going to have issues of head pressure and everything else. To make sure those coils are kept clean, try to push a preventive maintenance on those. If it's on a roof, a lot of times make sure that your coil is not drawing in air from your exhaust hood. So I try to make sure that my exhaust side of my condenser is blowing air towards the exhaust hood. That way it's not sucking the grease leading air from the exhaust hood. Um, Also, keep in mind you don't want hot air from one unit blowing into the air intake of another unit. So you don't want exhaust from one blowing into the coil of another one. Just going to cause inefficiency. It's going to cause more stress on that compressor and that condenser unit. Your system's not going to be optimized that way. Since we're on the roof, let's talk about exhaust hoods and makeup air units. I don't really size them. I've installed a few. If I have to replace an exhaust hood, say if it's too badly worn, I can't change bearings or I can't change the motor, they don't have to replace them. I will measure my exhaust hood downstairs. I will add up my BTU ratings of all of my equipment, and I'll measure my curve on the roof, and I'll relay that information to an exhaust hood company, and generally they'll size it properly for me, give them the voltage and everything else, and they'll take care of it. Makeup air units, same way. Size it, and then they'll give me the correct one I need. You want to make sure you're not creating a negative air balance or a positive air balance in the building. That's going to create issues in the kitchen, create issues with doors and such. So make sure you're closely balanced. A lot of times after I install one, I'll have a balance company come out. I don't have the equipment to balance it, so I just make sure that my motors aren't over ampering and go from there. We do a little bit of rooftop unit work, not a whole lot. So HVAC guys probably kill me, but I don't size any of that either. I just try to replace like for like as much as possible if I do got to replace one. A lot of these customers now supply their own, so I give them the model, make, model, serial number, and they supply the unit. I just go out and install it. So, you can't go wrong with that. Sometimes you got to measure curb, make a curb adapter, so forth, but that's about the worst case scenario. If you want to know any more about any installation issues, or if you have questions or comments, concerns about installations you've seen in the past, get a hold of me. My website's commercialkitchenchronicles.com. You can find me on YouTube, Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn under Pat Fenley. Instagram is kitchen_HVACR_repair. Twitter. I'm everywhere. Come find me and give me your input. I'd love to have you on the show. Maybe we can talk one day and we can run through some installation nightmares you've seen and go from there. Take care, everybody. Have a good night.